So I watched Matrix Resurrections, and it was complete and total hogwash. Now, I had no expectations for this movie. I've never been a diehard fan of The Matrix as a series, but even so, I can say that this is easily the worst Matrix sequel ever. I'm not kidding when I say I would rather trudge my way through Revolutions again than this shit. To me, the first movie is good, and I get some enjoyment out of the Animatrix and Reloaded, but a lot of my problems for the series as a whole comes from the writing and how annoyingly up its own ass it feels. The first movie was a little heavy on its self-indulgent nature, but it knew to balance that out with cool action and state-of-the-art special effects. It's a decent balance, but it works. The same cannot be said for its sequels. Reloaded has its moments, but it and Revolution suffer from being way too bloated and way too focused on the wrong aspects of making something truly deep and profound. And no matter how many people will go, actually, to try and convince you they're good, these movies fundamentally fail at trying to continue the legacy of the first movie and giving us a coherent trilogy. By the end of the third film, you're not satisfied with anything. You're left confused and frustrated, but thankful because at least it's all over. Unfortunately, we can't think that anymore because then this movie came along and gave us that continuation nobody was demanding. And surprise, surprise, the movie nobody wanted turned out to be as lazily pandering as any other nostalgia-baiting reboot-quel. But luckily, this movie had the genius idea that if it hid under the guise that it's a meta-commentary about reboots sucking the life out of a franchise while sucking the life out of its franchise, that dumbass intellectuals will swoon and call this movie good. And you know what? I gotta give the filmmakers props. Their plan worked. So many people are praising this garbage, and it's all because the movie thinks it's clever. But here's the thing about Resurrections. It's not clever. It is the very nostalgia-baiting reboot-quel it thinks it's critiquing. Sure, it has characters talking about how good The Matrix was, Matrix meaning the game in the movie's universe, not the movie from our universe, and so that gives the movie a chance to make commentary about itself in a very clever way. You see, I'm a moron who would never have guessed that the Matrix they're talking about in the movie was in fact the Matrix franchise. When one character says something along the lines of, "Hey, the Matrix was super cool and ahead of its time," they're not talking about the Matrix game, they're actually talking about the Matrix movies. Very clever, Lana. Nice of you to sneak that past my feeble general audience mind. Yep, this movie is a meta-commentary about The Matrix, which leads to some of the cringiest lines uttered by a major studio movie. But, okay, fine. This is a chance to really dissect The Matrix as a franchise and maybe make something that's self-aware. Yeah, no, it's just a standard Matrix movie, only more embarrassing. With bombastic action set pieces, long drawn-out speeches with big words about life and free will, and surrounded by CGI that's gonna date horribly but looks cool now. Except I saw this movie opening day and the CGI was already butt-fucking ugly. So yeah, I could rant about how the big corporate movie studios have ruined such a beloved franchise, but like I said, the Matrix sequels were already terrible, so this movie's suckage isn't really all that surprising. What is surprising is just how bad it is. So many crazy decisions were made to make this such a mind-numbing experience, and I don't know why anyone thought any of them were good. Like, take the constant references, for example. Obviously, this movie was going to be bringing back certain elements from the first movies. Remember in the trailers when random scenes from the original movies were intercut with scenes from this movie to remind us idiots what this is a sequel to? Yeah, I thought that was the advertiser's fault for thinking so low of us. But nope. Turns out those exact edits are in the movie. The movie literally cuts to scenes from the original for no reason other than to ignite your member berries. There is literally a scene where Neo walks into a room with the other characters and they're playing scenes from the original Matrix on the walls. They try to come up with some bullshit remember who you are jargon to explain why they're doing it, but we all know it's clearly there to remind the audience that the first movie exists and that it's awesome. And if they're thinking about the fond memories they have for the first movie, then they'll in turn have positive feelings for this movie. It's the oldest nostalgia-baiting trick in the book, and I'm shocked studios think they can still get away with it. But seeing how people are praising this trash, I guess I'm the idiot for having standards. Now at first, I thought this movie had a bold strategy at hand. Like I said, it starts off as a meta-commentary, with Neo living with the idea that the events of the first movies were all a video game that he had created. At first, it seems like it's gonna be a movie where you don't know what's real or what's fake. Maybe he is Thomas Anderson, creator of the Matrix game franchise, and he's just too into his work and he just can't tell reality from fiction. It's a bold, possibly even stupid idea for a movie, but hey, I'd be down to see that kind of a story fully realized. It's kind of similar to another sequel made years later, Phantasm 5. Yes, there were 5 Phantasm movies. And the 5th one, subtitled Ravager, is about one of the characters from the first movie transporting between 2 different realities. One where the events of the first movie actually happened and they're still feeling the effects of it today, and the other where he's a delirious old man who can't seem to convince his friends around them that the first Phantasm actually happened. It's a really neat idea that could lead to some great commentary. Unfortunately, as cool as that idea sounds, the movie looks like a Channel Awesome sketch and is written like a modern-day B-movie. But hey, maybe a multi-million-dollar film written and directed by one half of the directing team that brought us the original What's Real and What's Not movie will make something better. Well, they didn't, because at some point the movie just kinda gives up on that neat idea and instead just confirms that The Matrix was very real, and then it becomes a straightforward Matrix sequel. I mean, it's not like that idea was fleshed out that great anyway, but I would probably be more nice to this film if it actually went through with trying to be all mysterious over whether the events of the past films actually happened. I'd be more inclined to believe the people calling this a masterpiece. Instead, I'm left with a half-baked idea being overshadowed by the movie's cowardice to actually do something cool. Can we talk about how lame the powers in this movie are? Because the powers in this movie are lame. Once it's confirmed that the Matrix is real and Keanu is back on his Jesus bullshit again, they just pull the same tricks over and over again. Remember how cool it was when Neo could stop bullets in midair? Let's have him do it 7 more times in this movie so it sucks the cool out of that concept. Remember how cool bullet time was? Let's do it 7 more times in this movie, and also instead of filming slow-mo, let's make the camera quality go down and just have choppy frame rates every 5 seconds. Oh yeah, this movie has choppy frame rates at several points in the movie, which means it wasn't a mistake. The filmmakers intentionally put them in there. And it looks terrible. Speaking of terrible, both Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss were god-awful. I can't say they were ever good in the original Matrix films. Moss especially was always so monotone and boring to watch. If I had never seen Memento, I'd be convinced this woman can't act for shit. But she's honestly not as bad as Reeves, who is easily the worst actor in the movie. I know Keanu is not seen on the same level as like Willem Dafoe or Tilda Swinton when it comes to good acting, but he's usually not this bad. I shit you not, his performance was giving me flashbacks to when he was in Coppola's Dracula. So yeah, this movie is not very good, and yet people are still praising it because it subverts your expectations of lazy nostalgic reboots. But in actuality, it's still just a lazy, nostalgic reboot. You know, for once, I actually think the MCU movie that pulls the same shit was better. I'm not kidding. For all of Marvel's embarrassing mishaps and attempts at pandering this year, No Way Home was a better nostalgia-baiting film than this was. Because it had a plot, and it stuck to that plot. It used its nostalgia baiting to enhance the story and characters. Sure, it was pandering, but the references still made sense. This movie jerks itself off so much about how it's not a nostalgic cash grab that it ultimately becomes a nostalgic cash grab. None of the references enhance or make the story better. They weigh it down into fanfiction so devoid of charm or likability that I guarantee a bunch of nerdy diehard Matrix fans could make something better. It would be embarrassing and edgy and have 110% more Keanu dick sucking, but it would probably be much more watchable. This could have easily been just another harmless, lazy reboot, but the fact that it thinks it's more clever than it actually is just makes it 10 times more insufferable. Just because a movie thinks it's self-aware doesn't mean it's actually self-aware. Worst Matrix movie, bar none. Don't watch it and instead watch No Way Home. And hell, if you really want a better dissection of the Matrix movies, just watch the Nostalgia Critics reviews on them. I'm not fucking kidding. Doug Walker made a better analysis of the Matrix movies than the actual directors. Truly inspiring.